Hi everyone, I'm Tyler King, and you're here with In the Know, your number one source for anything and everything cannabis related in the great state of Florida. Today I'm joined by Gary Stein. He is the author of Great Green Hope and one of Florida's top activists and advocates for medical marijuana. First of all, let me thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background, how you got into the industry, and what makes you so passionate?
Okay, well, I'm going to try to keep it as the short version because I know you only want to go on for like 20 minutes to half hour, and I could go on for hours. But the fact is, I was actually on the other side of things. I used cannabis as a inebriant, as it were, during college time, and I never thought of it as medical too much. Although I'd heard stories about it being medical, I never paid much attention to it. That included all the time that I was in college, going through my degree in Michigan State University with my degree in microbiology and public health, and then going on to working in the Centers for Disease Control for 2 decades. I was an epidemiologist. I would go from one disease to the other, tracking the diseases, figuring there's nothing we can do about them but track them as far as TB is concerned, STD, and especially HIV, which I found thousands and thousands of cases, and I just basically tested them, said there's nothing we can do, this is all the drugs we have, and just send them on their way. So I had a background in public health, I have a background in science, and I also have a background in politics. Even when I was a little kid, I was getting involved in politics. I got involved in politics in college, not necessarily on the elected side, but taking a step back and taking a look at the people who were involved in student politics and making certain they're doing the right job. I think that is so important as an advocate, that you step away from the bubble that your elected officials are in and take a step back and then tell them what they may or may not be doing right. Because they might not be able to see it. So that was on my agenda at that point in time. What really got me was that my wife lost her eyesight due to glaucoma, and everything we tried, all the standard medications, didn't work, and she was losing more and more of her eyesight until eventually it was gone. And at the time, I was working for the Department of Health here in the state of Florida. When the governor, Scott, took over, he laid off 2,000 employees from the Department of Health, and so being a free agent at that point in time, I decided, okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start fixing some of the problems with politics here in Florida, because 2,000 employees should have never lost their jobs in the state of Florida. At the time, I went ahead and started going after the Affordable Care Act and trying to make certain that people had access to medicine. And when we didn't get Medicaid expansion here in the state of Florida, I figured, all right, maybe I need to look at something else. And at the time, I'd been writing for the Huffington Post since about 2009. I decided to start writing about this thing, medical marijuana, which I still called it at the time. Guys, don't ever call it medical marijuana. Call it medical cannabis. You can call it anything you want at home. But when it comes to medicine, when it comes to law, it should be called cannabis because that's the actual name. At home, you can call it anything you want to, and I'm very good with that, including marijuana, which had racist uses, but itself is not a racist word.
Yeah, it was actually used to demonize cannabis back in the Reefer Madness eras. A lot of people don't know that. So.
Absolutely. What the whole thing was is that cannabis was the name of the medicine that doctors were using on anything from treating people for opioid poisoning, which is what we now call opioid withdrawal and things of that sort, to epilepsy, to corns. And it wasn't until Harry Anslinger, you can insert a boo here if you want on the outside in post-production, who made it illegal by stripping the word cannabis from the lexicon and talking only about marijuana and saying this is a dangerous narcotic brought by dangerous Mexicans who, they come here, they're thieves, they bring drugs, they're rapists, and some of them may be nice, I assume, kind of thing. But the fact is they wanted to demonize the Hispanic population, at the same time use that to make cannabis illegal. So get rid of the word cannabis, use the word marijuana, and that is basically how it became illegal here in the state of Florida, along with everything else.
Oh, yeah.
And I was back about talking about where I got involved. So.
Hey, that was an important subject to touch on. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, if I go off on too many tangents, just slap me. But the thing is that we had situations in the state where I saw the possibility of a medical cannabis program actually starting. We already knew it was going on in Colorado. We already knew it was going on in Washington State and things of that sort. But here it wasn't going on. Here we had an elderly population. And here we had something that I had heard actually works for glaucoma. I mean, we heard jokes about it for even in that cartoon with Puss in Boots where he gets caught with catnip and says, it is for my glaucoma. Yeah. And so I thought to myself, maybe nothing else works because the thing that actually would work were not using.
You don't have
By that time, we found out it was too late. They had already done surgeries on her eyes to try to fix things. They're continuing to do surgeries to fix the surgeries on her eyes, but right now she has no eyesight whatsoever. So I started investigating it. I started writing a column about it in the Huffington Post. At that time, I also met Kathy Jordan. Kathy Jordan, for those who don't know her, is a wonderful lady who was diagnosed with ALS in 1986. She had been dead by 1990. Came to Florida in 1989 to visit a friend and store up some of her muscle relaxant pills and hopefully go back to Delaware to commit suicide and die because she didn't want to die of ALS. The fact was she came here, she got a joint of this stuff called Mayaca Gold, which was grown in the Manatee area by the Mayaca River, and it suddenly stopped the course of her disease. And she told me her story, and I thought to myself, this is something I had been missing all this time. And I started doing research on it and started pushing heavily to get the Charlotte's Web bill passed. And I helped Matt Gates to get that thing written. Of course, other forces got involved with the vertical integration, which I had no choice to talk about, but at least I figured let's at least get it on the books. Let's at least start to get it to be built. So we worked through that. We worked through the right to try for people who had criminal diseases. And ever since that time, I've been working hard to make certain that they write the rules and regulations properly. I mean, they originally wanted to have a system where anybody who put an application in could go into a big lottery, and the person who wins the lottery gets the cannabis license.
I do remember that going around the lottery, yes, but I do remember the talk about that.
Exactly, which means no matter how good or bad this organization is, it can be backed by organized crime. It doesn't make any difference. If they're lucky enough to win a lottery, they will get a golden ticket, and we squashed that. And eventually we got to another system which would have worked well if they had implemented it properly, but they didn't. But ever since that time, I've been working very hard to do everything I can. Now, I realized I used to work for the Department of Health. I worked for a brief period of time as political director for an organization which took care of people who had disabilities. That was only a temporary thing. And then I found myself, again, without a job. Believe it or not, ageism does exist. People don't really want to hire people when they got gray hair, no matter how young they are when they got it. This was a present for my wife, and so I kept it, okay? But
that's what I tell my wife.
Exactly right. And so I decided I'm just going to devote myself to the process of getting medical cannabis full access to the United States of Florida. And I met with John Morgan and talked with him in regards to all of his things in regards to the amendment is concerned. And I've never looked back. And I realized at one point in time that if I keep on funding this on my own, I'll have nothing left, which is practically where I am right now. But I've been able to get some donations from people who realize the fact that I'm out there fighting for them. I don't work as a lobbyist. I don't have any backing from anybody other than myself and my creator who put this plant on this earth, if you're religious. and I move forward.
Awesome. Well, first of all, let me thank you for everything you do for us. I mean, everybody that benefits from cannabis, or even people that have family members that use it, and everybody has somebody that is either personally affected by it or in one way or another is benefiting from it. So first of all, let me thank you for that. And then how about you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yes. Well, a couple of years ago, I decided that one of the things that we really need to make certain that medical cannabis goes through is more education. Absolutely. If I had to put down one single thing that is needed, and that is to prove to people that this is not the street drug that makes people go crazy, which has been a theory and a myth that's been going around for almost 100 years now. It's actually started in Mexico. And it is actually a medicine that treats, that cures. And the more research that I did for the book, the more amazed I was. I think the really big turning point for me was the very beginning of my research for the book. I started looking into how much this medication treats HIV. Now, this is not a story I like to tell too much because it kind of hits close to home, but I think it's kind of important. See, one of my jobs at the Centers for Disease Control was tracking HIV as an epidemiologist, which meant if you had a positive test, either from a Red Cross when you were giving blood, or if you went for an actual test to see if you had something and you had a positive confidential test, it was up to me to go to that person and get them retested, because the other tests were just basically a screen, and get a positive test. And if they actually had it, then they get the medication and try to save their lives. And I had to make certain I got the names of all their sex partners and anybody they shared needles with for the last 10 years, which is what our funding from Ryan White had required. And so I would say thousands of times took people from their first test to get them to the doctor, to get them involved with the medications like AZT at the time, which was killing their liver, sometimes killing them faster than the AIDS was, and watching them die. over and over and over again. It was a vicious cycle. Everybody that I tested that they were in contact with, same thing. I get them from their very first test to sometimes sitting at their deathbed. And it went over and over and over again. I just accepted it as part of my job that we were supposed to go ahead and track down this, so that when the cure does come around, we'll know exactly who has it, who needs to be tested, and make certain everybody who got it has whatever medication they can get, even though at that point in time it was still pretty much a death sentence. And then I find out that HIV actually cannabis actually treats HIV quite well. I know several people who juice the plant, whose T cell counts have gone from 0 all the way back to their immune system is totally rebuilt.
Really?
And the amount of clones of HIV has actually gone down because the body is able to fight off them reproducing in the body.
That's amazing.
And so just to think of how many people who I have sent off this earth from taking a test to their deathbed, and how many people I could have cured if I had just been smart enough to know what we know now.
Yeah.
It just made me absolutely furious and made me even more stoked to do what I did. So the book is not 100% finished yet. It's getting there, but I had to slow down because I had to concentrate at that point in time on all of the politics involved in getting this done right. Because I thought, for the state of Florida, this is an emergency situation. I have to help the people around me and get it going, and then go back to finishing the book and educating everybody else, so everybody else can get the same kind of benefits that eventually the state of Florida has right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I didn't even know that about HIV and treatment with cannabis, and I consider myself somewhat educated on the subject, but that's amazing. I did not know that.
One of the great things about cannabis is that you find out something new every single day when you do research. It's because we've been held back for so many years. We could have known these things back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Imagine how many millions of people wouldn't have had to have died from these terrible diseases all that time if we had just had the chance to have research. There was research in 1947 on epilepsy, which proved that CBD and THC helped with the seizures, but that study was squashed by the Bureau of Narcotics.
Yeah, they actually, back in the days, they used to prescribe it. Doctors used to use it, and that's where, like you said, cannabis sativa was the original lingo, and then when Anslinger and DuPont and company came around and kind of pushed the special agenda, we can say, or special interest on that, and so that's what led us to where we are today. So tell us a little bit about how people can get a hold of you, like if they want to donate to your cause, support you, which I'm calling everybody to please support this man. He is out there on the front lines fighting for everybody that is either in need of medical cannabis or has a loved one who's in need of medical cannabis. So tell us how they can go online and support you, a website and a social media.
Okay, well, I love Facebook. I've been told old folks like Facebook, so guilty as charged. But over there you can get my email address, where you can go to my PayPal account and donate to the cause. I also have various posts there of my Canna Fight Tonight, which some people have seen, which has posts on it which can link you to my PayPal account and allow you to donate to the cause. And I also have a thing called a Patreon account. That's Patreon. And that is basically a way that people can be a patron of the art, so to speak, or a patron of an advocate, which I'm going to be using to create my own podcast at one point in time.
Awesome.
That's strictly there to educate everybody who's not educated at this point in time about that. Spread the love, spread the education, and get not just 71% approval, but close to 100% approval for medical cannabis once everybody has the facts.
Oh, yeah.
And so people can donate to that Patreon account, which is a monthly thing. They can take out as little as $5 a month, and that'll help this project move forward.
Awesome. And you also have a website for the book, thegreatgreenhope.com.
Thegreatgreenhope.com, thegreatgreenhope.net, both work. And when the book is available, you can get a copy of it there. But otherwise, there is also information at that website, as well as the Facebook page for The Great Green Hope as well. And you can get information. I'm always posting information because I can't help but educate people. It's just in my blood, and I feel like I have to do it at all times. The book itself is a great way to educate folks. It has the history of the plant, it has a history of the prohibition, and it also has a history of people whose lives have been affected by it. A lot of times you just see these people as sound bites. You might see Kathy Jordan as a 5-second flash on a news report, but here I have a long chapter which goes to the whole narrative of their lives so that people get a chance to read what goes on, get to know these people as more of a true person, get the full narrative instead of a sound bite, and realize that these people have been have had their lives saved, have had greater quality of life because of this, both in Crohn's and in cancer and in ALS and all the other things that cannabis can do. And after each chapter, there's a scientific blurb for those who like to read that kind of stuff on how this particular person was treated for this particular disease, so people can understand that there's scientific evidence. This is not just a myth.
That's awesome. So they can get a background and relate to those people as if they, real person, instead of seeing a sound bite, and then get the actual scientific support. So to, debunk any of those myths or, what you would call that people believe, or the stigma that surrounds cannabis. So first of all, or last of all, let me thank you for being here and taking time out of your day.
Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate you being here, and I'm a big fan. And
Great.